Going on, y'all? How's your guys' day going? Hope you're having a good day. My day's good. Thank you for asking. So for today, I should have a couple of videos, maybe 2 or 3. And so if this video doesn't interest you, please go watch the other ones. I just have a bunch of ideas, a bunch of stuff to talk about on my mind. And I figured, why not? May as well upload all on the same day. But today, we're going to be doing a little bit of a story time kind of thing. Just a little bit of spitballing, if you will. What I normally do, basically. But just more personal. And the reason being that I'm going to be turning 22 in a couple of weeks here, and it just had me going through my memories, right, as if I'm 67 or something, right? I just was flipping through the years and decades of all the wonderful things I've done. Right now, it just brought me down memory lane, and I've just been thinking lately about how different I am, and not different in any kind of way where I have so much experience or really anything, I guess you could say, but just subtle things, just things that have always interested me about myself. I have a very odd way in which I think of myself, and I don't want to get too deep or too abstract, but it's kind of like blurry, I almost want to say, if that makes sense. Like, I think of myself and I don't know, like I almost struggle to put words to images, if you will. It's kind of like those really, really weird dreams you get of like things kind of gyrating almost, and they're really blurry and you're not quite sure what you're looking at. If you've had those kind of dreams, because I know that's common for some people, not super common, but common enough that hopefully you'll know what I'm talking about. But anyways, that's besides the point. What I was trying to say was it just brought me down memory lane and how much I've changed in terms of my, I guess, social personality. And what I mean is just being extroverted and introverted. And for the longest time, dude, believe it or not, I want to say extroverted, and then I very slowly transitioned into ambivert. I think that's what it's called, ambiverted. I might be saying it wrong. Basically, it just means both of them combined. And then I eventually transitioned into an introvert. And I don't say those terms or labels with such a heavy weight, because I kind of feel like more often than not when I hear people talking about those kind of things, they take it a little serious, I'm not going to lie. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not judging anybody by any means, but it's just interesting, right? When you hear people talk about it, they say it with almost like you can feel the heaviness in how they speak of it. And so take it with a grain of salt, I guess, is what I'm trying to say when I say the things I say about my personality, because I've always felt like I'm blurry in an ironic way, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like I come to situations before I even know, kind of thing. And that's not me trying to sound cool by any means or anything like that. But yeah, I can remember for the longest time I was just so not extroverted in the sense that I always wanted to be the center of attention kind of extrovert, but just more so that I looked forward to talking so much. And it was so funny too, because I remember going from, I want to say sensitive in the sense that I was very reactionary. I would react to a lot of scenarios and people and just life in general. And it wasn't until I think I was 14 or just about to be 14 that I remember I was complaining to my dad about something that I had been complaining about for years, or basically my whole life, honestly. And I remember he got irritated at it, because for the longest time he had tried to teach me the art of just not caring, right? Just not letting things get to you so much. And it was so difficult. But for some reason, this particular time, it clicked. And I don't know if it was just because I had hit that age or what, but all he had to say was, who cares? Who cares? And I think it might have been, because he's my dad, obviously. And so he kind of knows how to talk to me in that way where things click. And it really did. I honestly wanted to say I do, but then my brain was immediately like, dude, that's exactly what he's talking about. That's exactly why that's the problem. And so anyways, I remember transitioning from that very sensitive kind of almost like, how should I say it? Like putting too much weight on things, so to speak. And so I transitioned from that, and then I went full blown into like, not cocky or arrogant, but I just realized how much more fun everything was when you really do realize that you shouldn't care, not just, in of yourself, but because nobody else does. That was the thing that clicked in my head. And it was so funny too, in an ironic way, that same year, I was going into 8th grade. I've always been a year older than everybody. I went into 8th grade, and I remember I had got debate class, and I didn't even choose my classes, which makes it ironic. I didn't even choose my classes that got chosen for me, and I had gotten debate class, and I remember putting into practice that transition from sensitivity to just, people don't care, man. And it reinforced everything that I had thought at the time. And it continued to snowball. It continued to stack in that kind of way where I realized, man, everybody else is thinking the exact same thing 99% of the time, right? Like you could pick any scenario, specifically the ones with nervousness or awkwardness, right? You always tend to tell yourself, oh, what about this? What if they think that? Blah, 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 blah. Guess what? They're thinking the exact same thing you're thinking. And so anyways, I would take it upon myself to be that kind of person who would not like do an icebreaker, nothing corny like that, but I would just be the one to initiate. And for the longest time, I never really slowed down. I think that's a good way to put it. And what I mean when I say that is I never took the time to realize what it was I was giving up, or rather what I was willing to sacrifice for playing the part. I'll put it like that. And that just means being the caricature of what extrovertedness is. And that doesn't mean that I was fake. Don't get me wrong, there was obviously, I think everybody is a little bit, I want to say, maybe dramatic, you could say, and not like in a, like how you would normally think of that word, but dramatic in the sense of like animated, or just very, like kind of like how I speak with my hands, you can tell, I'm sure. Just stuff like that, or facial expressions, or even things I might say, the way I might laugh, just little subtle things here and there. But as I got older and older, 14, 15, and so on and so forth, it continued to cascade. But then it wasn't until very shortly, I want to say, I'm trying to think, I want to say 15. I think I was 15 shortly going into 16. And so that's not a long time. I might have been 13 when I went through that initial transition from sensitive to a little bit more lenient, if you will. Yeah, I think so. I think that makes more sense. Because I remember it was around the time when I was 15 that I went through yet another transition where it was so subtle and it was so kind of in your face, it almost makes you mad that you never paid attention to it. And anyways, it was just the realization that, I guess, actually, I know exactly how to describe it. Nobody cares. But this time, it wasn't in a good way, right? I'm sure you've heard people make that analogy before, where they'll say something like, oh, perspective is everything. You could say the same sentence in a different way, and it might, or rather, yeah, you could say the same sentence 2 different ways. You could say, nobody cares. Or you could say, nobody cares. I can do whatever I want, right? And so I basically went through that. I went through the initial happiness and the freedom of realizing nobody cares. But then it didn't take me very long at all to immediately realize, man, nobody cares. And that hit me way harder than anything had at that point. And it might sound like I'm making a big deal of it, or it might not even really be that big of a deal. Or you might be thinking, especially if you're a little bit older, oh, you were a teenager, you're going through your emotions and whatnot. And dude, I hated hearing that. That was one of my biggest pet peeves, because when you're that age, people will just say that for everything. It becomes filler. It literally does not matter what you're doing or thinking or what you're going through. People will just say that to you. And it was such like a lazy. And I knew it was lazy too, but I could never argue against it because they're older, obviously. And so they think oh yeah, I used to think the same thing, right? They always pull that, like it's like a trump card. It just beats everything, right? Like you could give the best argument, you could give a dissertation as to why you're not just a teenager in that kind of mentality, and they'll be like, yeah, I used to think the same thing, and you're just like, damn it, what else am I supposed to say to that? But anyways, it wasn't very long. It was just a little bit either before, no, it was after. It was just a little bit after quarantine had started, like a couple months. And same thing, you might be thinking, oh, well, quarantine probably messed you up. But no. In fact, quarantine for me was kind of how I said earlier, it was reinforcement. If anything, it literally reinforced everything I had thought during that transition, the same way that my debate class reinforced everything I went through that previous transition. And it was so, again, I'm not trying to sound dramatic in any kind of way, but it was a lot. It really was. I don't want to say it was just pure sadness, right? Because don't get me wrong, there was a lot of hurt involved, but I don't know if I want to say sadness. If anything, I would kind of say, I think there's a word, but I can't remember. Whatever the word is for anger that comes from sadness. Because I don't know if you know, and this is the way that I personally describe it, so it might not make sense, but I've always thought of emotions as primary and secondary. And so, for example, the primary emotion is sadness and the secondary emotion is anger. And so typically what happens is people project their anger when they're sad. And so I feel like that was what had happened, is that I got so angry. And again, not in the typical teenager kind of way where it was like, I'm mad at the world and just everything. It was more, I was mad at myself. I was so mad at myself because I realized that I just put all my eggs into one basket about, right, the title of the video that I kind of forgot about, to be honest. But I put my eggs all into one basket of that caricature of the type of person that I thought I was. And in a, I guess, self-sabotaging kind of way, I allowed my lack of care or my freedom in not caring, I allowed that to be my trump card for everything that had happened. And when I say everything that had happened, again, nothing serious, but just personal things to me that meant a lot at the time. And, just very basic things like going through friendships and learning my place in the world kind of thing, or just, I guess the number one thing was realizing that everything that I had known was even more true than I thought it was, right? Like, I'm sure you've had that happen to you where you go through the same realization, but every time you do, you're at a different stage in your life. So it hits harder and harder, right? Like typically people will say that kind of stuff when they're thinking about their parents, for example, right? Like they'll think, oh, dad is really smart, right? Like as a kid, and then they become a teenager and they go, oh, dang, dad knows a lot. That's cool. And then they become an adult and they go, man, dad knew everything, right? Like you go through the same realization, but it just hits you different. And so that was basically what had happened to me at that time, just about, I want to say where I fit in. And not only that, but like I was trying to say, that caricature of extrovertedness that I thought was me, just in I guess the most general way to put it. And that's not to say that I had thought that was all I was. I knew for a fact that there was more to me, but I was so willing to be the one to make a situation, like, I want to say naively optimistic, almost kind of like I'm not, how do you put it, giving the benefit of the doubt, right? Like, I mean, yeah, I guess in some sense that was what I was doing. But more than that, it was like I was just constantly trying to tell myself what the situation was, and rather why it was, in a way where I could never be like upset. Like I never had a reason to be upset. And that, funny enough, was exactly what made me so upset, was that I never had a problem with the things that were happening to me. And I immediately realized that it was from that caricature, from that extrovertedness that had, like I said, put all my eggs into one basket with, where I just thought that that was all I needed to do, right? That was all I ever needed to be in order for people to see me for who I was, kind of thing. And so dude, I'm not gonna lie, for me personally, I really do think it was a form of ego death, just simply because of the severity of the transition that I went through, but not ego death in how the most intense people will talk about it, right? Because when you hear the word ego death, you might be thinking of somebody who says something like, oh yeah, I took a vow of silence for 5 years. I experienced ego death, right? Like that's the top dog of ego death. Mine was way, way lower. But for me personally, it was definitely my closest, I guess, or rather the closest that I could get to ego death. And just because of the severity of the transition, because, like I was saying, it went from that extroverted ambivert to introvert all the way. And I never stopped, I guess, being like a bubbly person, if you will. Like I've always just been a bubbly person in that kind of way, but I definitely internally made those distinctions where they were needed, like how I was saying, and not like to get upset at things or even find things that I need to be on the lookout for, but just a sense of caution, right? Kind of looking out for myself in that kind of way where it's like, okay, like we've been through this before. Don't fall into this same type of mentality where you just end up kind of, I guess, betraying yourself, really, because they always say the worst thing you can do is betray yourself. And I think that was what I felt. Maybe that's not what I did, but that's what I felt. I felt like I was so willing to be myself for everyone else that I wasn't being myself for myself. And so it immediately went into not like self-isolation, nothing crazy like that, but just, I almost want to say, not peace in the sense of like a state of mind or even the generic kind that you might think of, right? Like I wasn't all of a sudden super calm, but I approached situations, or even more specifically, I approached people and friendships and just life in general in this way where I didn't feel the need to act either so quickly or so intensely as I previously would. Or like I would put my energy and I would put everything that I thought that I was at the time into those situations. And I think that's what made it exhausting, if you will, or just made me feel drained in that kind of way where it's like, oh, I put everything into it and I'm not receiving anything from it. And a very key distinction I want to make is that it isn't from, when I say, what I just said, it isn't from the perspective of like how most people will go through it, which is such a big pet peeve of mine. Most people will go through that kind of situation and then they'll say things like, oh man, it's all their fault. It's all people's fault. People don't recognize me for what I am. Right? They say those kind of things. Or even worse, people will say things like, I'm always the therapist friend. I'm always the one helping people. I'm always the one doing this. I'm always the one doing that. And look, right? You deserve your credit. You deserve to have that reciprocation. Absolutely. But on the same token, anybody that knows anything about kindness knows that you do it out of the goodness of your heart, right? Like if you've ever heard, which for some reason people have forgotten is a thing, do it for goodness sake. Not like, oh, for goodness sake, for goodness' sake. That's it. It's that simple. And we've forgotten that when you do a kind thing, or when you're a kind person, rather, not a nice person, because that's very different, which I'm sure you already know, you've probably heard about it 1,000 times, but rather choosing to be a kind person is like a duty in a kind of way. And that's always a very misunderstood distinction that people don't make. And so anyways, like I was saying, it never was from the perspective like that. It was never like a bitter kind of thing. It was never in that way where like I just started hating people for no reason. But instead, how I previously said, it was a realization of where I belonged. And I choose the word belong very, very importantly, or carefully. Kind of like I have a video titled actually about how I think about this scenario. And it's called Things Don't Fit, or no, Things Fit But No Longer Belong. And that's exactly how I would describe my transition. It is that realization, the realization that I fit, right? I fit in where I get in kind of thing, just basically, not necessarily like anything specific, but just that I could get around, I could make friends, and that I could be just convolvulal. I could be the type of person that can have a good time. Like, I'm not the type of person that people need to think about, like, oh, Jonah, I don't know if we should invite him, man. He might not be the type of guy we want to be around. Like, I was just always that type of guy where I was around, so to speak. However, I definitely remember just making those mental notes and understanding that's okay. And that admittedly that did hurt, but again, it hurt me more so than like anything outwardly. It was more so an internal thing. And that was where my transition into introvertedness began. But it was never introvertedness, like, again, like just not even wanting to think about people or like anything like that. Like, okay, I'll admit there definitely are times where I think that way, where it's like, man, I really don't want to talk to anybody, or like, I'm not trying to do that, right? But it's just, I don't know. I guess there really is no way to explain it where it's going to sound like I'm not basically saying what I said that I wasn't doing kind of thing. But it was just one of those things where I was just like, man, I'm like all friended up, right? Like oh man, that reminds me. Saying that, that reminds me. I think Tom Segura made a joke about that. Sorry, I know I'm getting distracted, but my pattern recognition is like blinking in my head. And if I don't say something, it's going to bother me. That's a Tom Segura joke. He says the same thing. He's like, I'm all friended up. I don't want any more friends. I can't be friends with everybody in the world. Anyways, sorry. I just had to say that. I had to let you know I was cultured, that I know my stuff. Anyways, but yeah, I just slowly fell into that, like, man, like I just, I don't know. It's just not really anything I'm interested in. And again, not like I'm not interested in people or talking. Like, that's if you can't tell, that's my favorite thing. There's nothing more that I enjoy than talking. But much like the older generations, I started to learn the importance of choosing how much you speak, and not just that, but what you say, how you say it, in a very specific way though. Not just in the generic kind of alpha male way you might hear, because you hear people say stuff like that all the time now, which is extremely annoying, because all it does is just basically disgrace any type of wisdom that you could get from those kind of thoughts. Because now they make it to where it's a competition thing, or a being better than people kind of thing. And that's just not the way that it's supposed to be, right? The reason why you might choose to say the things you say, or rather, again, how I said, very specifically how much you speak, doesn't come from an outward thing, right? Like, you're not trying to do that in an outward way, but in an internal way. Is that you attach value to the things you say, and to the things you don't say, and to the things you talk about, and to the things you don't talk about. And that you have a sense of importance with, I guess, just what you have to say, right? Like, it's become way too popular to speak on everything for any reason. And obviously, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be talking, or that we shouldn't be doing that, but I guess it's just the intention is more important than anything. Because when you have a society that's willing to talk about anything, 9 times out of 10, what that means is that people aren't thinking about those things. Because, I don't know, at least from my perspective, I think most things have been spoken about. Or not, okay, let me rephrase that. Not spoken about, most things have already been said. That's the thing. Which, ironically, I'm going to make a video about that after this. But yeah, I can remember that transition into, like how I said earlier, just a very slow, like calm, like I'm willing to look at situations from a broader perspective and not rush into them with this immediate trying to be everybody's best friend kind of thing. And it was one of those things where it had no immediate response. And so it almost made me like I didn't have anything to say to it. I hope that makes sense. I know I took a little bit to try to explain that, but it's like, okay, I guess the best analogy I could give you would be the same way that you accept something that you don't want to accept, right? Or I guess you could just say moving on, right? Like if you've ever gone through any type of grief, or if you've ever had a situation where you kind of just have to deal with it, right? And there's nothing you can necessarily do about it except for accept it. And so when you first go through those kind of things in life, usually what happens is nothing, right? You realize that the change was internal and you don't know how to feel about it because it's already happened. It's already there. It's a state of being kind of thing. And so that is exactly what I guess realized was like I had already transitioned. I had already became a different, more slowed version of everything that I was, right? Like I'm still the same person. You know what? You want to know what a better word would be? Polished. I would say polished, and not in an egotistical way or arrogant way. But what I mean is just the same way you would think of blacksmiths, right? Where you have the initial sword and it has its impurities, and it's a sword, right? And you could easily use that sword to do everything you need to do. But it isn't until you polish it and purify it of those impurities that it becomes the best that it could be. And so in the same way, I feel like that's what happened to me. I was that, I guess, yeah, you could say the same thing about like sports, right? Like how LeBron was always very chaotic, very out there. And I realize I'm comparing myself to LeBron. That's not what I mean. I'm not comparing myself. I'm just saying, I'm just giving analogies, trying to explain it. But yeah, he was just, explosive out there. He could jump, he could do just about anything physically, but then he became more polished and he became a lot more tactical, very tactful with how he did things. And so that's pretty much what had happened is I just realized that not every situation required that explosion. And again, that vigor and that energy is helpful and healthy, but put in the right places. And I'm going to be honest with you, I still am going through that transition, I would think. Or at least maybe not transition specifically with that, like the introvertedness, but learning how to not let it be so one-dimensional, I guess you could say. Like I'm in that, or at least I would think that I'm in that current stage of life where it's I don't know. I guess I really don't know. And I'm okay with that too. That was another big problem about me with my extrovertedness, if you will, if you could even correlate the two, is that I never wanted to not know. And like, not that I wasn't comfortable with not knowing, but that I was so eager to have my answers that it made me uncomfortable. And so anyways, not to get off topic, I'm definitely in that transition now where I'm trying to learn how to balance the two. I'm trying to learn how to be introverted in the right moments where I need to slow down and think about things. Like, I think I talked about this in one of my videos before. It was trying not to make judgments so quickly about things that I see online or just people in general, right? Like that would be one of the things that I think I'm currently trying to work on the most. But yeah, this took 30 minutes. Jeez, I am such a, I'm just a chatterbox. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, let me know what you think down below. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Don't forget, check out my other videos, please. I would appreciate it greatly. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you for watching.